So this is meant to be a playtest of The Burning Future, a game under development right now. But instead, it's a quick overview of this system as it currently is. I just want to run through it really quick so you know what the game is. This is a game of post-apocalyptic sword and sorcery. It's meant to be a quick game played in about an hour or two by a group of friends. It can be played by two people or a bunch more if you want. So it's ideal if you have not a lot of time and not a lot of people. The fun thing about it is that it's pretty straightforward. It's definitely more of a story game. The players go around and start by creating their adventurers, and the adventurers are, well, before I get into that, let me describe the future a little bit more. The basic idea is that this is 700 years after some great apocalypse, where now savage humans struggle to survive within the ruins of the old world. So people are still around, but they're living hand to mouth in these tiny villages. Now, the world is very diverse. There are lots of different radiation and magical energies released as a result of the apocalypse, plus, of course, leftover medical experiments creating toxic environments and mutants and all that kind of good stuff. Old technology is still around, but it's very deadly. It's kind of fragile because it's been sitting around for so long and no one really knows how to use it anymore. And magic exists. The apocalypse caused a magic to reappear, and it tends to drive people kind of mad. So it's powerful but dangerous, which kind of makes it fun. And it's a world of lots of adventure. There are lots of these tiny little villages that are now starting to form into slightly larger communities. Meanwhile, there are mad sorcerers running around trying to find bits of the old world to further consolidate their powers, and some traders are starting to move between different communities and building up a slightly more complex civilization. So in this world, you are a group of adventurers traveling from village to village, helping them out. So your adventure is made up of a few different pieces. The first is your role, which is kind of like your class, your profession. So you could be a hunter out there hunting wild mutant beasts. You could be a scavenger who lived in the ruins of the old world. You could be a wizard who has access to magic powers. You could also be a trader who spent a lot of time going back and forth in different communities and has some experience around the world. Then once you have that figured out, that gives you a basic template. Then you decide on a stunt for your character. This is some special thing that your character does or has. So it might be some skill you've built up over time that's kind of unique to you. It could be some mutant power that you have in this weird future. It could also be some physical item, a fabulous sun sword that you carry or something along those lines. Then you have your catchphrase. This is a short phrase that encapsulates your character's personality. It does have a mechanical effect, so it's there to kind of describe how your character views the world. Never tell me the odds would be a classic catchphrase. Then there's one extra role-playing bit called your refusal. This is the one thing that your character will not do. It could be harming an innocent. It could be harming humans, for example. Lots of different ways you can spin that. It could be that you have some feeling about mutations. So lots of different options there. But it's another way of kind of defining your character. And then each character gets 5 hero points, which I'll explain here in a second. So the game is divided up into a bunch of different story acts, basically, 3 story acts. And the game comes with a bunch of different story structures that you can use as a basis. You can make it up as you go, or you can choose from some classic kind of story structures like a villain kidnaps a villager, or a warlord attacks a community, or a sorcerer attacks the team directly. And so the game provides you with some ideas for each of those pieces of the story. And each basically each player gets a turn as kind of the DM for one scene in each of those acts. So you kind of go around to each player. You'll have one scene per player per act. So if you have 3 players, then you end up with a total of 9 scenes throughout the story. So it gives you kind of some structure to hang your hat on, but you can definitely vary off from there. So within each scene, one person is what's called a narrator, kind of like the old narrator of the Saturday morning 80s cartoons and such, where Our adventurers enter town X. So you get to do that, and you get to decide what problem the characters are facing. This is usually just some bad guys who leap up out of nowhere. But with that story structure, you can kind of tie that to what's going on. Now, here's where things get a little different. In this game, every antagonist, every bad person, every villain, if you will, is represented by a die. So if you're facing 4 mooks, then you grab 4 dice. D6s for smaller enemies or more basic enemies, and D8s for like lieutenants and more tough bad guys and big monsters, that kind of thing. And so the narrator rolls all those dice, and then the players get to decide how to react. And one of the nice things is at this point, all the players react. So even the person playing the narrator can now sit back and play as a player. All the dice that roll 1, 2, or 3, the heroes immediately defeat. They're the classic mooks in one of these stories where you just, you bash them over the head, they're done. Any that roll above that, you then have to do something with. You can use a hero point to knock down a die by 1 point. So something rolls a 4, you can just spend a hero point to knock that down to a 3, and then you defeat the enemy. You can also use your roll, your stunt, or your catchphrase. You can invoke any of those, and by doing so, you can roll a die. You start with a D10 the first time you invoke it, and a D8 the next time you invoke it. So you get basically 6 uses total, a D10 for each and a D8 for each. And when you do that, you roll that die, and it then knocks out anything that rolled lower than that. So you could roll a D10. If that rolled an 8, then anything that's 8 or lower, it knocks out. So you have to kind of decide, okay, what do I want to? Do I want to use my hero points? Do I want to use my my catchphrase or whatever? And the neat thing is that using each one of those has some obvious effect on the fiction. So if you're using your stunt, which might be your fabulous sun sword, then obviously you're using that sword, excuse me, that sword to strike at the bad guy in some particular way. If you're using your catchphrase, then it's more of a personality effect. You're doing something brave or remarkable, whatever your personality and your catchphrase sort of suggests. And so you go through that for each of the bad guys. Now you can decide not to use all your hero points or your attributes there. Any enemies that are left over then cause you some complication, and then they're actually slid to one side. And you then can continue with more scenes. If you do have any leftover dice, you don't have to deal with some complication resulting from that. But then at the end of the act, so once every player has had a chance to be the narrator, kind of the GM, throwing out these dice, then you get a special sort of end of act scene where you have to deal with the dice that you had not defeated. So those dice come back to be problems at the end of each act. So if you have 3 scenes and there's 1 die left out of each one, then that's an extra 3 dice in addition to all the problems you're going to have anyway to deal with in that scene. So you got to kind of figure that out. And so you continue through the game that way. So you're rolling these dice, 1 for each bad guy, and then you're trying to deal with them as you go through the story and trying to juggle those uses of your character and your hero points, and see if you can defeat everything at the end. Now, of course, if you get to the end of the story and you don't defeat the bad guy, and by the way, the bad guy is represented by D10s, 1 for each of the villain's special abilities. If you get through that and you're defeated, you don't die, but you get defeated. The villain does manage to move forward with his or her plan. And so you now have a 2-parter, and so things are looking bad for you, and the villain's moving forward, and so now you have a plot point for the next play of the game that you can play through. One of the nice things about this is, like I said, even if you haven't played the game before, this will all happen in about 2 hours. So, and once you're used to it, you can run a game in an hour or so. So it's a very quick game to run through and play, and you get some great fiction out of it, I think. So that's the basics of the game. And that's the basic idea. I need to do some more playtest testing, obviously, of it, but that's the basics. And thanks for watching. Let me know what you think.